Here is another story for us to listen to. It is entitled A Vain Attempt. It had been an exhilarating day for the famous prophet of Israel, Jonah. King Jeroboam had been greatly pleased with him because of the news from God which he had delivered eloquently and with passion earlier. God had told him to convey to the officials of the land that their nation would be greatly blessed and that the kingdom would expand even more. Already they were experiencing exponential growth in trade and industry. He marveled at the extent of God's love and patience, for their present ruler was apathetic towards his deity and preferred to govern on his own terms. He was open to hear good news, though, but only if the news were indeed good to his ears. There was only one challenge that they faced. A former enemy, the Assyrians, had also grown in might and power. They were known to be a ruthless people, and yet they were moving forward economically just as they. The prophet had just arrived home and had taken off his sandals to prepare himself for his evening prayers, but as soon as he started to kneel on his mat laid on a pounded earth of the floor, the flame from his oil lamp flickered unusually, and a strong wind brushed past. It unnerved the lanky and bearded sage. "Jonah, son of Amittai," a voice soft but steady accompanied the wind. "I am sending you to Nineveh. Go tell its people that their wickedness has come to my attention. Tell them that if they will repent, I will relent from having to punish them." Jonah became listless. Was he hearing God right? Are you saying you are giving these wicked people a second chance? Why not just annihilate them all so we could finally have peace here in Israel? Is it justice that a mere sorry from them would suffice and you would forgive? Just like that? Really? He fretted on and on as he vented out his complaint. The morning sun hurt his eyes like a dart hitting its target when Jonah awoke the following day. No wonder, for he found himself still on the mat near the open window. He must have fallen asleep in his exhaustion after he had spent hours pleading to God for him to be allowed to abort his mission. It had been a vain attempt, as the voice had not come back to respond to him. He quickly ran out of the house to scoop up a drink from his cistern and then gobbled on a piece of bread. He quickly conjured up a plan. If he were unable to deliver the message to the Ninevites, then God would have no choice but to send down judgment on them, as they would not have been able to heed the warning. He chuckled as something in his thoughts excited him. Immediately, he rummaged through his trunk, packed a few clothes and some provisions in a satchel, and followed the path leading to Joppa and Tarshish without ever looking back. Upon reaching a summit overlooking the seafarers' town, he basked for a while, drinking in the beautiful scenery before him. Sparkling blue waters mirrored the same color of the skies, which were of the same shade but of a slightly different hue. Cumulus clouds played all over the heavens, and a flock of birds slowly disappearing in the distance completed the perfect picture. The scene were all framed with leaves from protruding branches of the sycamore and oak trees which surrounded the elevated platform where he stood. Below the incline he saw boats of every size and one about to leave. He lingered no more and dashed to purchase his ticket and boarded the vessel in haste. The captain was still rapidly giving orders while the crew hauled in the last of the cargo. He had been given directions to his quarters, but settled on a cot at the bottom of the ship. He grinned as he laid in his hammock. For sure God would have to send someone else, for he had gone AWOL. But by then it would have been too late for the Assyrian capital. The boat squiggled when the anchor was released and the sails were hoisted up and continued to rock gently as it plowed the waters. He smiled as he closed his eyes, imagining himself in an exotic island munching on delectable fares and sipping on sweet wine. Around him were colorful flowers and luscious shrubs, while music played soulful tunes in the backdrop. He fell on a wet floor while still heavily intoxicated in his sleep fantasy. The boat was no longer rocking but was being violently tossed. "Wake up, we are about to sink! Start calling on your gods to have mercy on us," a man ordered as some passengers were still in slumber, as Jonah had just been. Furnitures, utensils, and cargoes floated about as a deluge of water from the upper decks cascaded continually, causing a cocktail of disaster in its wake. Jonah struggled to climb up the ladder, and his eyes grew wide with terror. Outside thunder bolted like hundreds of splitting rocks as flashes and streaks of fearsome light illuminated the sky in rhythm with it. Rain pelted down heavily, while people everywhere scrambled to help balance themselves and the boat. Others were scooping water in buckets and tried pouring them back into the raging ocean, but to no avail. The captain raised an idol in the air and began to chant his prayers as everyone else did too. "Man, you better not just stand there. Do something and cry out to your God too," a scraggly sailor with a mouthful of missing teeth heaved in exhaustion as he pointed out to Jonah, who was now jammed in the opening between the cabin and the bow of the ship. The captain turned just then and asked, "Who are you? And who is your God? For we do not know who has brought this evil to come upon us. Speak up," he shouted as he turned the wheel to evade a coming wave. "My God is the great Jehovah, who parted the Red Sea, who brought down the walls of Jericho, who established the kingdom of David and gave splendor to Israel in the years of his son Solomon. I am his prophet Jonah." "Oh my, your God is well renowned. He is known to be powerful and Lord of all. He commands all other gods. Cry to him, Jonah. Perhaps he will grant mercy," the captain replied. "But alas, sir, I was sent on a mission, and I had thought to escape. I think I am the one who has brought this calamity upon us," the prophet cried in horror, afraid to be the cause of everyone else's demise. Without warning, the sea fumed and grabbed the vessel, pulling it upward to a monstrous height, and then it rushed back down. As it did, it threatened to crash them all to smithereens onto the ocean's floor. "Throw me into the waters now," Jonah asked through gritted teeth one more time. The sailors struggled to row harder when they caught sight of land nearby. But then another tumultuous wave outmaneuvered them, almost toppling the boat. Feeling hopeless already, the man on board decided to do as Jonah had asked, and reluctantly held him by his arms and legs and plunged him into the rabidly cold waters. Jonah felt the sea calm down and relax from its anger when he hit the water. But then he dropped down rapidly. He felt his breath getting all sucked out of his lungs. Just then, a mighty vortex swirled him about and siphoned him into a large tunnel before he landed on a slimy surface where the water was shallow. The stench was horrendous, but air permeated his being again. He was totally soaked but gratefully alive. In the dark, he felt weeds entangled all about him, and he sought to release their tentacles from him. He realized he was in some moving and living cavity. He must have been swallowed by a whale that had risen above the sea surface to breathe. For 3 days he was in a quandary, but then he cried in surrender to God. "I called because of my affliction, and you answered me out of the belly of Sheol. You threw me into the deep, in the heart of the sea, and flood was all around me. All your waves came past me, and I was banished from your sight. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. Those who regard lies forsake mercy, but I will sacrifice to you with a voice of thanksgiving, and I will do as I have vowed." With that, the great fish spewed Jonah, and he was washed to a sandy shore. Jonah could barely see the fish's tail as it turned back to its home in the deep. Jonah lied in a heap while the morning sun caressed his paled skin. He struggled to get up, and just then he saw a small pond of fresh water. He quickly bathed, hung his garments on a bush until it dried, and dressed up again to somehow regain a form of decency to his appearance. He walked up to the broad city gates of the Assyrian capital. A throng of merchants and travelers came in and out busily through its arched opening. The lone Hebrew had entered unnoticed. No one really minded him. Everywhere, though, were foreigners haggling with the locals. Slaves and exotic creatures in cages were sold faster than any produce on sale in the markets. Rough men and angry women were the common sight Jonah noticed as he traversed the city. After a day's walk, just before dusk, Jonah saw a jutting boulder and decided to use it as a podium to announce God's message. Without hesitating further, he spoke of the imminent calamity with a voice loud and clear. It commanded the attention of everyone within the area. He tried to frighten them with God's judgments and was tempted to exclude God's love and mercy in his delivery, but a strong urge prompted him to speak of it out. Waves of inspiration flooded through his being that the rest of the preaching seemed to have been taken over by the divine himself. Word of it got to the king, and the prophet was summoned to appear before the lords and rulers of the kingdom. As he spoke the message again, the king trembled. "Your God is known for his great power and might. We fear him as he, the God of all gods, is great. Though we loathe your nation, we are afraid of the force behind you. I am certain he will do as he says he will. What must we do then? We are determined to obey. Turn from your evil ways, and he will have mercy upon all of you. He is pleased when goodness abounds and evil is rejected." The king bowed humbly at Jonah's declaration. "This we will certainly all do." With that, he decided to fast and ordered everyone else in the kingdom to do so too. Already, men and women and children everywhere had started to mourn and cover themselves in ashes. How the once proud city became all of a sudden a city in lament. Jonah grumbled again as he sensed an agitation within himself when he left the fortress. He perched on a summit by the eastern side of Nineveh, for it was the perfect vantage point to observe it. He felt remorse, for he still wanted God to rain down fire and brimstone on the people he abhorred greatly. He wanted God to do to them as he did to the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, but nothing happened. Suddenly a vine grew to hover over Jonah, and it shielded him from the heat of the sun. He felt a sense of entitlement. He probably had pleased God so. But then the next day the vine withered, and its leaves bore many holes from a worm that had eaten them up. Jonah's temperament changed, and he fumed in anger. Then the same steady yet gentle voice commanded the air. "Jonah, why do you fret? How is it that you are mindful of the fate of a vine you have not planted, but have no regard for a city of over 150,000, including livestock? They have repented and turned from their evil ways. Should I have no mercy upon them? Each one of them are just like you, a breathing, feeling being." Jonah realized that God was no respecter of person or race. All he wanted was for men everywhere to be kind and loving. He finally understood that God was indeed a God of love, and he does not take pleasure in the death of the wicked. We have now reached the end of our story. Thank you for listening, and until next time, God bless you.